Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Mrs. Ruth Allow. I'll be taking you through this class, methodologies of educational planning. Here we'll be looking at the meaning of planning as related to education. We'll be looking at educational planning. We'll be looking at the methodologies of planning itself. Without wasting much of our time, let's look at what is planning. What does it entail? What is planning? Planning is a process of thinking about a thing or organizing the activities required to achieve a desired goal. Planning can also be defined as choosing a direction or destination first, and also deciding what routes and intermediary stop required to get there. Now, there is always an objective to be achieved in planning. You have to plan towards a desired goal, towards a desired objective, towards achieving a purpose. A planning tools can help management in its attempt to cope with the uncertainty of the future. Now, you can plan towards the future. It's also a tool for any management or any organization towards obtaining or coping with uncertainty of the future. Planning has to do with checking progress against a map or making course adjustments as required in order to realize the desired goal. Educational planning, therefore, is the process of setting out in advance strategies, policies, procedures, programs, and standards through which an educational objectives can be achieved. It can also involve a process and orderly thinking. It is also a process of applying scientific and rational procedures to the process of education. That's looking at the educational goals. The nature of educational planning is the application of systematic analysis to the process of educational development with the aim of making education more effective and efficient in responding to the needs and goals of the students and society. Educational planning looks into developing educational system, making sure that education is more effective and efficient, and it responds to the needs, to the goals of the student and the society. Now, the society is looking forward to providing its people with effective education, with efficient education. So educational planning helps in achieving the goals of the student as well as the goals of the society. Let's look at the term administrative planning. Administrative planning is a plan normally relating to and complementing the operation plan or order which provides information and instruction covering the logistic and administrative support of the operation. Administrative planning has to do a plan relating to every operational plan as regarding logistic administrative support of the operation. Now let's look at planning itself. According to the adage that says to fail to plan is to plan to fail, planning has to do with every individual, family, state, organization, country needs for everybody to plan. Now, there's a need for every individual to plan, every family to plan, every organization, every state, every country to plan ahead, to plan for the future. To this end, educational planning in less developed countries comes in place in a recent time. Why? Because the recent interest in planning education in these developing countries arose from the recognition of the importance of education in the social and economical development of the society. In order to utilize the scientific process in achieving a better output in planning and sustainable attainability of the system, planning of education must go through the following steps. It is necessary to recognize and define the key problem involved in the planning. And before any planning, you have to recognize what it takes to plan. You have to recognize the problems that will be involved in planning. That's in the process of planning. Now let's look at planning again. Draw 1963 said planning is the process of preparing a set of decisions for actions in future directed at achieving goals by optional means. Now, you have to have plan A, you have to have plan B, even plan C, as the case may be. So, planning is the process of preparing a set of decisions for actions in future at achieving goals. So, educational planning has a set goal to be achieved. And the goal is the object to plan to achieve the goal of the society, the goal of the student. Planning is also a system of managing economic process that involves production. Its essence consists of determining economic targets and methods for their implementation. In particular, the allocation of means of production and of labor to different uses. Planning can be an instrument for economic strategy to be able to achieve the optimum growth or group of national income or maximum satisfaction for social needs. Everybody needs to plan, every state needs to plan, every organization needs to plan, even every country needs to plan. So planning is a wide course as it has to do with systematic analyzing or organizing how the future will be, how you want the future to be. Nwoko said planning is the activity concerned with developing short or long range guides that will most optimally use the best available resources so as to achieve specified objectives. Akanji also explained that an organization, either public, private, or non-governmental, should identify and consider alternative policies, generate a consensus about appropriate actions, and provide legitimacy for major changes in direction. So all these are the definition of planning. According to Lunch, it says planning is a process of establishing priorities for future actions and an attempt to solve economic problems which stem from the existence of scarce resources. To our planning implies giving thought to the goal, aspiration, and priorities of a nation. Now, it will be a close and look at above experts definition of planning will make us realize that there are these four unique features among them. That's the orientation to action, orientation to the future, orientation to achieve goals. All these are the three unique features among them. Now, orientation to action has to involve planning. Planning involves taking of needed and necessary actions, which does not take place by coincidence but by willfulness and willingness. Um, the orientation to action that every planning has to involve taking needed and necessary action. Now there are unnecessary actions that are not needed at the time. So there, according to this, it explains to us, or it says planning has to do with taking needed actions at a time, willingly and willingnessly. Now, orientation to the future. Now, this is another unique features found among the experts' definition that issues of future has to do with things to be done later and not now or present. Each of the definition projected into the future or attainment of set goals and objectives in later life or later futures. All of this definition talks about planning towards the future, looking into the future. Orientation to achieve goals looks at the difference between goal and objectives. While goal is long time or long range, objective is short range. Objectives can be realized within a short time or period of about 30 or 45 minutes or 1 hour class. It depends. Goal, however, is realized probably within a month, a year, or more than that. So planning is therefore targeted at achieving goals, which are long range or long term. So every planning has to do with achieving set goals. Let's move on. Let's come to concept of educational planning and other planning concepts. Educational planning and other planning concepts. According to the Implementation Committee on Nigeria National Policy on Education, educational planning is said to be a continuous process of obtaining, analyzing facts, and from empirical base of provision of information and analyzing facts or decision making on how well the educational system is accomplishing its goal in particular, and how the cost effectiveness of educational programs and specific projects can be improved. Additionally, Nkoko said or explained that educational planning is a process of preparing a set of decisions about educational enterprise, that is, educational business. Now, in such a way that the goals and purpose of education will be sufficiently realized in future with the available resources. Additional argued that it is difficult to provide a universal acceptable definition of educational planning, which is true. But he also provided a view of what educational planning is, which is the process of applying scientific or rational procedures to the process of educational growth and development so as to ensure the efficient and effectiveness of the educational system. To achieve this, a target needs to be set by education planners indicating what the organization, that's the school system, would like to achieve. If all the effort on improvement from the present performance of school, on the other hand, when forecasting is made on the plan, on the information, the focus will tell educational planners whether they are on track to meet the target or not. A major function of planning education is to achieve rapid social development at a minimum cost. A situation where planning education using whatever processes and techniques has failed to achieve positive results calls for a critical re-examination of the current planning practice in Nigeria. Now, the best settling problem with planning education in Nigeria seems to be the fact that educational planners and school administrators involved in the planning process are nonchalant about effective use of data. Experts, professionals, and work on a team towards achieving oriented goals. Let's look at the nature of educational planning. We have all explained what educational planning is all about, bringing out different definition, orientation of action, orientation of differences, and the last one, which is orientation to achieve goals, orientation to the future. Now, all these three explains educational planning or planning in different ways. Now, planning has to do with a long-time goals. That's it's a goal, not an objective. So educational planning plan towards achieving a long-time goal, not a short-time goals. Let's look at administrative planning. This type of planning has to do with planning in administrative perspective. That's administrative planning. It has to also do with the distribution of responsibilities and powers for different and various levels of education. Both the administrative responsibilities and powers are phase-wise planned, re- relational to the level of different educational administrators. Cashier explained that the administrative planning of education makes a detailed plan on the structure and organization of education at various levels, as primary, secondary, and tertiary or higher level. General, technical, and professional. Administration planning prepares planning on the following basis. That's one, duration of educational program. The administrative planning will look at the duration of educational program, the duration of each uh, teachings within the class. This is supposed to be 30 minutes, 35 minutes, or 40 minutes. It also look at organization and coordination of educational programs by the appropriate authority. It looks at financial allocation or budget for an educational program. Number three, it also looks at engagement of educational experts and officials in an educational program and smooth management of such educational program and so on. All these are the five areas that administrative planning comes in place when we are talking of education. Now, the administrative planning or the administrator will be the one to arrange the duration of any educational program. They should arrange or organize, coordinate educational programs. They are to finance or allocate budget for educational program. Engagement of educational experts and officials in an educational program. Smooth management of such educational program and so on. So all these are the work of the administrator, and that's the administrative planning. Let's look at academic or curricular planning. This refers to planning for smooth academic activities or transaction of the syllabus for a given course at a given level of education. It also encompasses planning on education in relation to both the needs and demands of both individuals and the society. The academic or curricular planning has the following constituents. One, formulation of educational goals and targets, formation of curriculum committee for the development of curriculum and selection of proper strategies and methods of teaching, planning of content units of a course, planning for evaluation, planning for review of curriculum in use, planning for the use of library, planning for the gifted, planning for the physical challenge, planning for remedial instruction for slow learners. All these are the work of academic or curriculum planners. Now, the academic or curriculum planning has to do with achieving or formulating educational goals and targets. They are there to plan the academic, both the teachers, the lecturers, they will form a team or a committee. This committee are to decide on what unit a course should take, on what method of evaluation to be applied. They are to review the curriculum, they are to plan for the use of the library, they are to plan for the gifted, that's the talented. They are also to plan for the physical challenge, planning for remedial instructions for slow learners, etc. All these are the work of academic or curriculum planners. Let's look at co-curricular planning. Now, the co-curricular has to do with things that are outside the educational exercises of the student. It has to do with more with recreational activities that students will be involved in during the school environment or within the school environment. But it will also contribute to the total development of a child. To this end, co-curricular planning includes planning for student welfare services, planning for sports and games, planning for social activities and programs, planning for curricular, cultural activities and programs, planning for hobbies and the rest. Like in University of Ibadan, it is the custom of students to be engaged in varieties of co-curricular activities during the second semester of each section. Such activities include faculty week, departmental week, hall week, religion activities, man-o-war activities, sports weeks, and so on. So if you also engage in such activity, it will further add and improve on your total development. So co-curricular planning has to do with any recreational activities that a student should involve with. Now, it's outside the educational exercise. It's outside the educational curriculum. That's why we call it co-curriculum planning. So it has to do with the welfare services for students and at what time should be given, planning of sport and game, planning of social activities, going on tours and all that. Any activities that will add to the value of students. Now, instructional planning. This is a planning of educational at macro level. This is because it has to do with the planning in classroom situation in relation to a given topic of a specific subject. Cashier said this planning refers to emotional and organizational climate of the classroom. It, however, includes the planning for instructional objectives as required for the specific topic. Every topic that ought to be taken in class should have an instructional material attached to the lesson plan. The instructor or the teacher should make sure that he uses an instructional material. A textbook is an instructional material, but it goes beyond a textbook. There are pictures, diagrams, there are physical things a teacher can present within the classroom to make the activity lively. Those are instructional aid, instructional materials. So planning instructional planning has to do with micro level because it's micro teaching in view. This is because it has to do with the situation within the classroom. Now, according to Cashier, he said that this planning refers to emotional and organizational climate of the classroom. So it deals basically on the teacher, on the instructor, on the lecturer, the person taking the class. So, however, it also includes planning for instructional objective as required for this topic to be taught in a class, selection and organization of learning activities, the selection of suitable and appropriate teaching aids, and its usage as appropriate to in the course of lesson delivery, selection of suitable evaluation techniques to find out the learning outcome. So before any class activity, an instructional materials should be planned, an instructional aid should be planned ahead, which should specialize on the topic in view. Now, the essence of this is that the techniques to be used, the instructional aid will help in the learning outcome. It will help in the climate of the classroom. Because Like in primary section, they like pictures so much, even in secondary section. The moment they see a diagram, they'll be very happy. Oh, this is a laptop, this is a computer, this is the part of the computer system. The monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, the joystick, and the rest. Put it in a diagram, place it on the board. That's the topic for the day, part of computer system. It makes the learning process more effective and faster than explaining to the system to the student that a computer has the different parts. The part is the monitor, the keyboard, the joystick, the mouse, the printer, the CPU, and the rest, and they are not seeing it. But when you bring it to them or you take them to the computer lab, it helps to hasten the educational and the learning outcome and also the processes. We have institutional planning. This is a planning that has to do with the needs, requirement of every institution, which will be achieved through creation and maintenance of a planning atmosphere in such institution. Though Cashier added that first level to the third level, okay, that this should be achieved in first level to the third level. Still, it also is there to satisfy that planning takes place at grassroots level and includes all types of planning in its jurisdiction. This, however, explains that planning for administrative or academic or curricular development, planning for non-academic or co-curricular activities, planning for schools, community relations, planning for discipline, planning for developmental activities or programs, the planning for proper utilization of community resources for total development of institution. Now, this type of institutional planning has to do with different administrative planning. It also has to do with academic or curricular development, planning for non-academic or curricular activities, planning for school community relation, planning for discipline, planning for developmental activities or programs, planning for proper utilization of community resources for total development of the institution. So this planning will look into how all these areas can be covered. It's going to plan for the curricular development. It entails different forms of planning. That's why we call it institutional planning. Let's move on. Let's look at evolution of educational planning in Nigeria. That's the history of educational planning in Nigeria. Or be equipped with how an activity involved. For example, you can ask your father to tell you a story of how your family involved, and it will marvel you that your great grandfather started the involvement of your family from one place or the other. Now, it is therefore important that as a student of educational management, you need to be properly equipped on how one of your courses, educational planning, involved. Ogunsanya made it known that people all over the world have been greatly concerned about the future or the fate of education, upon which the training of their children and the growth of their country depend. Ogunsanju further made it known that since 1950, the term has grown fast to the extent that both government and international agencies committed themselves to the idea of educational planning. Various nations have since then given top priority to the new term, which remains a mystery, especially to most individuals upon whom its success depends. Many questions agitated the mind of these individuals. Among such questions are: What really does educational planning mean? How does educational planning works? Why do we really need to have educational planning? What would have happened or the consequence of not having educational planning? How or in what ways is it different from the past? Another question that can be asked is, why is it so important to find a new kind of educational system? Taking a look at the question above, there is need to really understand the meaning of the term educational planning. Additional and Ogunsanya explained that in a general context that educational planning is the process of applying scientific or rational procedures to the process of educational growth and development so as to ensure the efficiency of the educational system. Now, remember that this definition have also been reflected in the first lecture of this course. Above the definition shows no rigidity but flexibility of the definition of educational plan. Planning, however, is application or applicable to all phases of life and not only educational um, system alone. Planning is applicable to health, applicable to sports, family, economic, transport, creation, and lots more. So Ogunsoju noted that the beginning of educational planning in Nigeria was traced back to 1945. That was the year the World War was, however, subjected to a barrage of scientific, technical, economic, demographic, political, and even cultural changes, which shook everything in sight due to the Second World War. Nations such as Britain, France, Russia, and even United States of America started to review their educational system. Various steps that were taken include creation of crash program, building of more classrooms, provision of emergency training so as to cope with shortage of manpower. Though during the said period, Nigeria was still under the British protectorate. To this end, the British government attempted to stabilize our education by enacting the Educational Act of 1944. The 1944 Education Act, according to Ogunsoju, requested that each of the 146 local educational authorities in both England and Wales to prepare a development plan which was to be submitted to the Central Ministry of Education. But with respect to Nigeria, the act resulted into the launching of 10-year development welfare program in 1946. The target of the plan was to run or be in operation between April 1, 1946 to March 31st, 1956. Ogunsoju recorded that before the proposed for the 1946 to 1956 development plan were presented before the Legislative Council, Governor Badilon of Nigeria had originally proposed in 1942 a 10-year educational plan for Nigeria. The plan had originally laid down proposals for Nigeria educational development between 1944 and 1956. Ogunsoju therefore explained that there was an extensive review of literature by Nigerians, and such literature indicated that the success of any educational system is rested on the following: 1. Proper planning. 2. Efficient administration. 3. Adequate financing. Now, the listed success variables confirm the views of both education or educated Nigerian citizens and even the government on the great importance of educational planning, especially in a country's development. Ogunsoju further made it known that above the situation made the Nigeria government to respond or reply urgently to then identifying in the 1950s the educational needs for our citizens, especially by embarking on what is known as approach of linear expansion, which is one of the planning strategies. Now, all these are the history of educational planning in Nigeria, which started after the Second World War. Now, the Second World War made Britain and other countries like France, Russia, and even United States of America to rebuild their educational system, like creation of crash programs, building of more classrooms. We know what crash program is. Crash programs that were created to help people to attain a level of education. They are not following the proper procedure of the educational system, just a crash program to help to achieve a specific aim. Building of more classrooms, provision of emergency training so as to cope with shortage of manpower. And this was what helped Nigeria. Why? Because Nigeria was still under the British government council, and they also attempted to enhance our educational system by bringing the Educational Act of 1944, requesting that each of the local educational authorities to prepare a development plan, which is to be submitted to the Central Ministry of Education. And this act was launched in Nigeria in 1946, which expired in 1956. We are going to be rounding up the class here. We'll be rounding up the class. I have an assignment for you. Here is your assignment. What really does educational planning mean? How does educational planning work? Why do we really need to have educational planning? What would have happened or the consequences of not having educational planning? How or in what ways is it different from the past? And the last question says that, why is it so important to find a new kind of educational system? This assignment should be sent to bimseli@yahoo.com. bimseli@yahoo.com. The assignment should be sent to bimseli@yahoo.com. These are the questions. What really does educational planning mean? How does educational planning work? Why do we really need to have educational planning? What would have happened or the consequence of not having educational planning? How or in what ways is it different from the past? And why is it so important to find a new kind of educational planning? I hope we all get the question. Send your assignment to binzelli@yahoo.com, stating your name, the department, the course. I don't mean the course code, the course. Your name, your department, your course, and also your center. Thank you and do have a lovely day.